The Mid-America Veterans Museum is a 501c3 nonprofit business. The museum would not exist without the donations of our generous community. Your donations ensure the museum continues to share and preserve the stories of our veterans. Would you like to be part of something special? To donate, visit mavm.org and click on Donate. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only. The primary purpose of the Operation Insight podcast is to educate. The views, information, or opinions expressed on the Operation Insight podcast are solely the views of the individuals or guests involved and by no means represent absolute facts. Operation Insight does not accept responsibility for their views or comments. The Operation Insight podcast may at times cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to suicide, abuse, violence, severe mental illness, sex, drugs, and alcohol addiction. You are advised to refrain from watching or listening to the Operation Insight podcast if you are likely to be offended or adversely impacted by any of these topics. Neither the company, host, director, or the guest shall at any time be liable for the content covered, causing offense, distress, or any other reaction. Welcome to the Operation Insight podcast from the Mid-America Veterans Museum with your host, Jason Galvin, and co-host, Sergeant Ethan Gross. Welcome back to the podcast, family. We're so glad that you're joining us. Tonight we have a special guest in studio, and I'm going to let Ethan go ahead and introduce and kick us off.
Yes, tonight Jason and I are speaking with Chief Petty Officer Chuck Robinson, U.S. Navy, April 2004 to October 2017. Part of that service was spent on the USS McFaul. Chief, good to have you here.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for agreeing to speak with us and share your story of service. Like with most guests, we'd like to start with an introduction of you as a person and where you're from.
Sure. So, born and raised St. Louis Metro. I grew up in South County, went to Oakville High School, joined the Navy when I was 19 after going to community college and finding that wasn't really my route. And my dad was a Vietnam vet, so he kind of always pushed me away from the military. And then after my first semester at St. Louis Community College, I came back with a .666 GPA, and I said, I think it might be time I go talk to a recruiter.
Your options got limited
real
quick.
Yeah, he said, I think you're right. I'll go with you. So, that's kind of where I got my start.
Tell us a little bit more about your dad.
Sure. So my dad was my hero. He was a very proud American, very patriotic guy. He served in the Navy 1972 to 1973 on the USS Hamner, DD-718. Deployed to the South China Sea, Gulf of Tonkin. His time in the Navy was short because they were doing a ammo unload at Subic Bay, Philippines. Somebody dropped a 5-inch shell down a ladder into his knee, and basically I told him they could send him back to San Diego and do surgery at Balboa, or they could give him a ticket home. And he said, I'll take the ticket home. When he got home, he was so dark and tan that they were watching for him. My grandma and grandpa were watching for him to come down the brow, and my grandpa says, there he is. Grandma says, where? Oh, right there. That's not my kid. That's some Filipino kid. And, so after that, he became a computer programmer, raised my sister and I, married my mom in 1979, and a lot of great things, a lot of great memories. And ultimately, he wound up being one of 22 one day in February 2013, took his own life.
I'm sorry to hear that, Chuck.
Sorry, man.
He's buried at Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery.
Yep, I go see him often.
Before we started, you had told us about your long family history in the military. Give us a synopsis of that.
Sure. So, very long, proud history of service with my family. My dad, again, was in Vietnam. My grandfather was in the Navy in the tail end of World War II. He was an aircraft mechanic. Didn't leave California, but served all the same. My great uncles were one of the first Navy nuclear power engineers and one of the very first Navy Seabees. So lots of Navy heritage. On my mom's side, my grandpa fought in the Korean War in the Army. I've had family going all the way back to the Revolution. The first of our family that came from Ireland served in the North Carolina militia. So yeah, it's something
That's really
our
incredible.
family's very proud of.
Great heritage.
It is.
Is that part of what made joining the Navy an easy decision for you?
Yeah, actually, my dad tried to get me to join the Air Force. He gave me this story about how when they build Air Force bases, the last thing they build is the flight line, and quality of life in the Air Force is great. Ultimately, it came down to, my heritage is with the Navy, really, and the Navy at the time at least advanced a little faster than the Air Force did, so that was the easy choice for me, really.
So you mentioned your dad sort of discouraged the idea of joining the military early on. What was your dad's perspective when you were a child? How did he talk about his time in service?
He didn't a lot outside of sea stories, port visits, things like that. He didn't talk about the war a lot. That was a climate where people were coming back, and it was very different, being called baby killers and spit on, and definitely didn't come home to a grateful nation like our generation did. So my dad didn't, between that and then obviously friends that he lost in the war, and he didn't want me to go through that path and either get the same kind of welcome home or ultimately, make that sacrifice. Yeah, it wasn't really something I was really that interested in. I was a senior in high school for 9/11. It was 2 days before my 18th birthday. So I was in my first hour gym class, and they came over the PA, started talking about the first plane hitting, and we were in the gym, so we couldn't really understand it very well, catching bits and pieces.
Kind of garbled.
What's going on?
Yeah.
I go to my second hour class, and the teacher rolled out the TV cart, and we watched that second plane hit live. That teacher's brother worked in the Twin Towers, and found out later that he went to get coffee for the office, and he was on one of those upper floors where everybody was lost.
Wow.
And I think that's where it was kind of a split between starting to get interest in the military and also being kind of afraid of it, right? It was 2 days from turning 18. People are talking about we're going to have a draft again, and,
Sure.
and in a way I was worried. But I kind of went on with life. It was kind of in the back of my mind, but not something that I was really seeking after until I started going to community college, and wasn't going real well. I was spending more time chasing drinks and girls and than I was studying books, and the Navy absolutely turned my life around. There's a lot of those stories where people say, serving in the military saved my life. I really think it did. I don't think I would have gone anywhere in life if I hadn't joined the Navy, really.
So tell us about that first year in the Navy.
Sure. So that's an exciting one. So I left for boot camp on April 5th, 2004. We got delayed at the airport leaving to go to Great Lakes because George W. Bush was throwing the first pitch at the Cardinals' opening day game. It's the first opening day game I ever missed of a Cardinal season. Eventually we got up there. So Great Lakes in April, still pretty cold. And I really met some great people just starting out in boot camp. A couple of local guys that I left MEPS with that were from Missouri. And then another guy that I was pretty close with went on to be a SEAL. He's now a news broadcaster and doing some cool things. About halfway through the 8-week recruit training for the Navy, I got a letter. And we would get letters every day. We were only allowed to read them on Sunday. But, lights out comes. I'm got a letter from my girlfriend back home, and I'm going to read it. So under a blanket with a flashlight, I read this letter, and my heart drops, my jaw drops when I see something to the effect of the pitter-patter of little feet. I found out that she was pregnant with my oldest son in a letter in boot camp, and I had to wait then. This was on I want to say it was a Wednesday that I got the letter. I had to wait till Sunday to say anything about it, and I went to my my recruit division commander, and petty officer, I really got to use the phone. Here's what's going on. And he's like, you know what? All right, I guess that's bad enough. We'll let you go use the phone. So wound up asking her to marry me over the phone from a payphone at boot camp. She said yes. She came to my graduation. She was 5 months pregnant. And we got married the day after I graduated from boot camp at the courthouse in Waukegan, Illinois. I went from boot camp, graduated Memorial Day weekend of 2004, went from there to CTRA school in Corey Station, Pensacola, Florida. And CTR, it's a cryptologic technician collection, so signals intelligence collection. And September came around, and Hurricane Ivan bearing down on Pensacola. It was my 21st birthday. My friends and I were all getting ready to head out and have a few drinks when the commanding officer of the base comes around. He says, guys, this hurricane's coming in. It's going to be pretty bad. The schoolhouses are rated for like a Category 2 or 3, and this is going to be a 3 or 4. If you have transportation in a northwest direction, get out of here. Call next week. We'll tell you when you need to be back. I didn't have a car in Pensacola, but a buddy of mine did who was from the area, and I looked over at him. He said, pack your stuff. We're going. So 21st birthday, we stopped at a gas station in Mobile, Alabama, and I chugged a tall boy of Budweiser, and that was my drinking for my 21st birthday. We drove through the night and got back to St. Louis early in the morning, and that was September 14th. 3 days later, my son was born. The only reason I was able to be here for his birth was because of that hurricane. And for a brief moment, I thought about naming my son Ivan after the hurricane, but it doesn't go that well in a Irish and German American family, right? Ivan. From Pensacola, I went to Norfolk, checked into my first ship, the USS McFaul. I was in the shipyards at the time in Portsmouth, Virginia. Spent the first few months in the shipyards, what we call in the Navy cranking, as a food service attendant. You're working in the galley, helping the cooks with food, clean up, all that stuff, and it wound up being especially arduous in the shipyards because we had to be there at like 4 o'clock, and we didn't get to go home till 7 or 8 right at night. Yeah, so that's pretty much my first year in a nutshell. A lot to pack into that.
I had no idea when I asked that.
I was going to say we didn't
What a
talk
year.
about that at all.
Share with us, because I'm ignorant to this. When you say checking into the first ship, what does that entail to check into a ship?
So these days, it's at least supposedly a lot easier. There's a very strong sponsorship program in the Navy where you're communicating with your sponsor at your gaining command months before you arrive. My sponsor later became a good friend, Tom Stout. He was not as in close communications as the Navy expects of it today, but it was more kind of the norm then too. When I got to Virginia, I really had no idea where I was going. So I went to Norfolk Naval Base, and at the gate, I said, I'm looking for the McFaul. They said, McFaul's in the shipyard. You're in the wrong place. Eventually found my way over to the shipyards in Portsmouth, Virginia. There's only a couple of ships at that point, so the big 7-4 really makes it easy to find. Brand new boot, E1, walking up, really nervous, right? No idea what to expect. No idea who I'm really supposed to be looking for or anything. I get to the quarterdeck and I, explain to him, I just came from A school. I'm looking for Petty Officer Stout. He's my sponsor. He was on watch at the time and couldn't go anywhere. He was on a topside rover watch. And so he called our leading petty officer for our division up, who was a local St. Louis guy, and came and got me. That first night on the ship, most people live out in town. Working hours are over. The ship just vacates, especially in the shipyards. Nobody wants to be there. They're grinding and welding on the ship all the time. And I get my stuff into my rack, and I was a heavy smoker at the time. I was like, I've got to find somewhere I can smoke. I could not find my way back out of that ship to save my life. Finally ran across a young ensign, another Missouri guy, Andrew Ashcroft. He's like, are you lost? So, yes, sir. So also probably one of my very first interactions with an officer. And I was like, yes, sir. just checked in, and he helped me back out and showed me where I could go smoke and all that good stuff.
How long did it take to learn the ship where you didn't have to, you can just move about any direction you wanted to?
Yeah, a destroyer's a lot easier. That small boy Navy between destroyers and cruisers, there's about 300 people in the crew. Whole ship's 505 feet long, 66 feet wide. I would say within a few days, as far as operationally where you need to get around the ship, maybe not into the depths of engine rooms and stuff like that, but operationally, you learn your way around within a couple of days. Aircraft carriers are quite the opposite. They're like a small floating city. I've got a good friend who's deployed on an aircraft carrier right now. It's interesting. With an aircraft carrier, you can check in the same day as somebody else. You can spend 5 years on that ship. You check out on the same day, and you never saw each other in between.
Incredible.
With
Wow.
a destroyer, it's if you've been on board for a week, everybody knows who you are.
Gotcha.
It's like high school gossip all over the place there.
I got you. Is it men and women or just men?
It is. So there were still a lot of male-only ships when I joined the Navy. McFaul was a co-ed ship, though, so we had men and women.
The McFaul, I want to make sure we get this in here. It's named after a fellow Chief Petty Officer.
It is. I'm glad you brought that up. It's a great story.
Please tell us about that.
So I had the privilege of actually hearing this story firsthand from one of the SEALs that served with Chief McFaul at Operation Just Cause in Panama. They were down there. There were several different units that were part of that Operation Just Cause. It was all about ousting Manuel Noriega. This particular team, they were sent to the flight line. They were told to disable Noriega's aircraft. The plan was they were going to go up on a rock wall. They were going to take a rocket launcher and lob a couple of rockets into the hangar across the runway and get out of there. At the last minute, somebody in the brass came back and said, I guess because if we destroyed that plane, we would have to give whoever we replaced him with a new plane. Instead, they said, disable, don't destroy. And now this team is up against a mission where they have to cross a well-lit runway at night with machine gun nests up and down the runway.
It went from a long-range mission to close quarters.
Right. It went to we're going to poke over this wall, launch a couple rockets, and get out to
Easy day.
we're in it.
Wow.
And those guys started crossing that runway, open fire on the machine gun nests, and I don't remember how many. I want to say it was like 6 or 7 people that Chief McFaul drug out of the line of fire back to safety before he succumbed to his own wounds. Yeah, one of them was a SEAL who had just gotten his trident on the plane flight down to Panama.
Wow.
And it was just a really cool story. At the time, at least, it was the first ship in the Navy that was named after a Chief Petty Officer. And that was always something that, from the time I eventually joined the Navy, it was always what I aspired to be, was a Navy chief. I think that story is a big part of that, is checking into my first ship and that story about Chief McFaul. And it's kind of crazy how many times I've just run into people that intersect with that story or were part of Operation Just Cause or something like that.
And that name means something to them.
It does, yeah.
Tell us about this. You're not the first person that I've heard say being a Chief Petty Officer in the Navy means something. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So Chief Petty Officer is an E7 in the Navy. Don't ever call a Chief Petty Officer an E7. It's like a slap in the face because we operate somewhat differently from our peers in the other services. I try to say that without any sort of disrespect at all. I've had friends in other services that have been felt disrespected by that comment, but the way Navy chiefs drive the mission, train and mentor junior officers, and directly advise the command triad, the captain, the XO, the command master chief, is very unlike any other service. When you're selected as a chief in the Navy, you go through a 6-week initiation program where it's very arduous in that it's supposed to be overwhelming. It's supposed to build you as a leader and also teach you sometimes we need to ask for help, right? And those lessons really get driven in over those 6 weeks. And occasionally we have the opportunity to have a service member from a different branch. I've seen Marines and airmen. I don't think I've ever seen a soldier go through, but I'm sure they have. E7 or above can join our initiation and become honorary chiefs. It's one of those things that once you're in that fraternity, that brother and sisterhood, you're there forever. I just had a week or two ago, one of my old junior sailors reached out to me. He's since separated from service, but his wife has joined the Navy. She's in A school. Somebody she's friends with there was going to her first ship. Couldn't get a hold of the sponsor or the sponsor coordinator. So he reached out to me kind of asking for some advice. I said, I can go out to the Navy Chief's Facebook page, and I'm sure we can get an answer. Turned out the reason nobody was getting an answer is because there was an issue on the ship, and they cut off communications. So once they came back, the ship was very, very prompt in getting to the sailor, and then I also got feedback on the Facebook page. But it's forever. If another chief ever needed something, or if I needed help from it, the answer is always yes, because we have that common bond.
I want to go back to two things that you mentioned, Chuck. The first, you mentioned that you had to do essentially food service. Now, is that because you hadn't officially received your rating? Is that just part of being a new person on the ship? Why did you have to do that?
So, by and large, sailors receive their rating prior to going to a ship. There are undesignated personnel who get there eventually, but by and large, we all go with a rating. When you're new on the ship, that's just part of it. You're going cranking.
Gotcha.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes you get lucky and you get to go work in the chief's mess or in the officer's wardroom. I got in the crew's galley, and you get all of the welcome aboard from everyone.
What did you enjoy about that, or did you enjoy anything about it?
About mess cranking in particular, it did help me get to know people across the ship outside of my own workspace early on. So, later when I was actually working in my rate, if I needed something somewhere else on the ship, I knew somebody that I could go talk to.
That's a huge positive, I would think.
It is.
The other thing, I want to make sure we don't just gloss over it. That first year is kind of mind-blowing. If you can, get us back to your mindset when you read that letter and you have that realization that things have changed.
Man. It was, so initially at the time prior to the letter, I had every intention of changing my contract from a CTR to SWCC, which is the Special Warfare Combatant Craft Crewman. I had passed the physical fitness test for it. I couldn't be a SEAL because of my vision. I'm sure I never would have made it anyway, but I felt like this SWCC thing was something really cool, a high-speed thing that I could do, and I was super interested in it and had every intention of reclassifying and doing the SWCC challenge. And I got that letter, and everything changed. And in my mind, it was, SWCC's a lot more dangerous. SWCC is going to be away from home a lot more. In reality, I was probably away from home a lot more at sea than I would have been in the SWCC program, but definitely a different operational environment, right? I wasn't in combat engagements really like I would have been in that NSW, NSO community.
There was some give or take either way.
Right. And if I had it to do all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. I loved 99.9% of my time in service. Even those times that you just got to embrace the suck are really the times that build that trauma bond, right? Those were the closest relationships you have in life, for those people that you went through some of the hardest times in the military with. So,
and one last thing about this topic, I hope you don't mind me asking.
Sure.
So Hurricane Ivan is to thank for you being there for the birth of your child.
Right.
Tell us about once you arrived to St. Louis with that buddy and you were there for that day.
Yeah. So we were at my then wife. We're not married anymore, but we were at her mom's house. She was kind of staying there until she moved to Virginia with me. And I remember she was right at her due date, like within a couple of days. And she started calling the doctor's office. Hey, my husband's here. He's not supposed to be here, but I just feel like he's supposed to be here now, right?
Sure.
And can I get induced? So I know that he's going to be here. And doctor's office said no. She called back. They said no. Eventually, she got him to say yes. So the night of September 16th, we went to Big Mercy Hospital.
Sure.
Used to be St. John's at the time. And
Off of New Balance.
Yep.
Yeah.
And she kind of went through it throughout the night, going through those stages of labor and finally getting there about 1 o'clock the next afternoon, I think it was. And I will never forget the moment I became a dad. It's the best moment of my life. I cried like a baby. I remember walking out to the waiting room to tell our family that our son was here, and I saw my dad, and that's when the waterworks came, and I just couldn't even hardly get through it. It was the best moment of my life. Probably not the best judgment, but being newly 21, and it was my dad's idea. He said, let's go to McGurk's and have a beer, celebrate. Mom and baby are resting, and so we did. I haven't lived that down to this day. My ex-wife and I get along great, but yeah, that's one thing that'll
don't bring up
still
McGurk's.
come up from time. Yeah, exactly. Again, I don't know if I'd change anything.
So I wanted to ask those questions because, and this is a very forward-thinking question, fairly early in the interview. How do you think being a father so early in your Navy career affected you? Was it for the positive? Was it complicated? How would you describe it?
I'd say complicated is a good word. In a way, it really made me mature a lot faster, where most of the other people my age were going out and drinking every night. And I mean, I still did that a lot. I was a sailor. I hardly drink anymore, but back then, we could go out until 4 o'clock in the morning, and at 05:30 we were on the PT field ready to run. I don't know about ready, but we did it. But I didn't go out nearly as much. I was home with my wife and my kid. That was my world, really. And the guys I worked with were largely uncles to my son all the time, even if they drove his mom crazy sometimes. Getting into military humor is a little different. Yeah. I would say overall that's part of why I feel like I had a successful career in the Navy, is right away it's not about me anymore. It's about supporting my family the best way I can. At the time, at least, I felt like the best way I could do that was to advance in rank as fast as I could. I would probably throttle that back a little bit if I had that to go back on and spend more time with my family and have a better balance, right?
That's interesting. So hindsight being 2020, now you see that trying to advance up the ranks so quickly is actually a detriment to the family life.
To the family life, yes. I think it was good for my sailors. It was good for my career. But for my family, my family suffered for it.
How so?
So when I was on the McFaul, typical deployment schedule is 6 months out, deployed, 18 months back home. And over that 18 months, you're doing a lot of training and stuff like that too. But for the most part, you're home at night. In 2005, a non-deployment year, we spent over 180 days away from home. 2006, we deployed to the Persian Gulf and spent a lot more time away from home, right around 7 months, I think we were deployed. And then we had workups before and, other stuff after deployment as well. So overall, we were probably deployed 8 or 9 months altogether in 2006. 2007, my wife and my son moved back to St. Louis. She went to beauty school, kind of did that GEO bachelor thing for that last year I was there. We were in the shipyards. I actually tried to volunteer for individual augmentee deployment to Iraq and was told, nope, we need you to too much here. We're in the shipyards. I'm not doing anything, but okay.
They needed that head count.
Right, exactly. And then the end of 2007, I went to recruiter school. I was ready to get out of the Navy. My whole time, I guess, said before, from early on, I wanted to be a chief. It was, if I stayed in, I wanted to be a chief, but I was really probably going to get out. Initially, I wanted to do 4 years, get out, come back home, be a St. Louis County cop. And a chief I had at the time was a new chief to the ship, and he asked me what my intentions were at my AOS. And I said, Chief, I'm getting out. And he said, you don't want to think about it at all? I mean, you've got a pretty good re-enlistment bonus that you could get. I said, no. He's like, well, why do you want to get out? I said, I'm just ready to go back home, Chief. And he said, well, why don't you go back home in the Navy? You could be a recruiter. And I'm thinking, well, I've only got 4 years in. Can I really be a recruiter at that point, right? And he's like, yeah, you're an E5. You've got a surface warfare pin. You can be a recruiter. Do I still get my bonus? Yeah, you still get your bonus. So, all right. You got me for another 4 years. So I came back to St. Louis as a recruiter and started out at the office in South County. It's now a Freddy's, right at Lindbergh and Baptist Church. Did some good work there with some great people. Eventually went to the West County office in Baldwin. One of the guys had left the South County office to go run the West County office. I went to go help him. Then eventually I ran my own office in Festus. I guess that's a good segue you asked before. One of the great people that I served with when I was recruiting was Sean Sullivan, Sully. He was a great mentor for me. He was in the recruiting command. His job was to meet with prospective future Naval Special Warfare, Naval Special Operations candidates. So he did all the physical tests for people that wanted to be SEALs, SWIC, EOD, divers, rescue swimmers, all that. So he was a rescue swimmer, jumped out of helicopters to save people for a living. And I want to say that he told me he had been in 6 helicopter crashes.
Wow.
Mind-numbing, right?
Yeah.
Like,
seriously.
About a year, roughly, after I left recruiting, I got a phone call that he had been in a 7th helicopter crash and didn't make it out of it. They were doing heavy lifting operations, I believe, off the side of a mountain in Oman, and got some kind of weird updraft that destabilized the bird, and it crashed. That was a big loss to a lot of us. I think everybody that ever knew him. It was one of those guys that was always smiling, and yeah, it's
fellow St. Louisan as well.
He is, yeah. Lindbergh High School.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a bar on Tesson Ferry called Hessler's that we used to go to a lot when we were recruiting. It was right down the street from the office. And they have a picture of him on the wall there with a bell. Anytime any of us go in, we have to have a shot of Jameson and ring the bell for Sully.
Classic Irish drink.
Yeah. I think his brother puts on a memorial golf tournament every year in the area too.
It's really cool, Chuck, to be able to speak to somebody who knew someone like Sully. Someone who I've read a few articles prior to this interview about him, and the same thing. People said he was always smiling, very friendly, always willing to help. Sounds like he was an outstanding man and an outstanding service member.
Absolutely.
That was 2012, if I understand correctly.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
And
I think I said 8, but that would have been after.
Oh, you're okay.
McFaul.
I think
2012
July 2012.
Right. Yep.
Okay. This I'm glad you brought that up. Tell us about, from what your understanding is, tell us about the Sea Dragon and the issues with that helicopter.
I don't know that much specifically about it, other than what he would tell me, that they crash a lot, right? They do great operations, right? I couldn't tell you how many of them crash. We were talking before we started about, helicopters and Ospreys, and you couldn't pay me enough to get inside some of those things, especially after Sully. But the Sea Stallion is the Navy's equivalent of, I can't think.
Like a Chinook or something?
It's not the same as a Chinook. It's bigger than a Black Hawk. But yeah, aviation is one of those areas in the Navy where I dip my toe in enough to get aviation warfare qualified,
Sure.
general knowledge. But when it comes down to, is really just and honestly, Sully loved the Sea Stallion. Like, always talked about going back and flying. He absolutely loved being on the bird. If he had made it through that crash, I think he'd be here today, still talking about how much he loves those helicopters.
Well, let's go back to the McFaul. The McFaul is a guided missile ship. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a Flight 2 Arleigh Burke guided missile destroyer.
And something that, my understanding anyway, makes it unique is the missiles are
Vertical launch system.
Vertical launch system.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So on the McFaul, I think it was 91 vertical launch missile silos that we had. So typically when you see a Tomahawk launch, that's where they're coming from.
Sure.
They also carry different, like SM2s, SM3s, I believe. And that was really, that's the main part of the armament of a destroyer, right, is those guided missiles that they can let fly at any time. If you're topside and you hear a siren, it's time to not be topside anymore. Because as soon as that hatch opens, that ball of fire is going to come up, right behind the missile. And
the propulsion, I guess, would blow you off the ship.
Right. Yeah.
That's a bad day right there.
Yeah. That or the 5-inch gun is not something you want to be topside with either. Those things shake the whole ship.
So tell us about your deployments on the McFaul.
So I had one Middle East deployment on McFaul. Navy deployments are a little different from pretty well any other service because that's when we get to travel the world, right? A lot of people think we're on the ship, we leave, we come back, and we get off the ship 6 months later. Generally, like every week or two, usually we're pulling into port somewhere. We're usually there for like 3 to 5 days. 1/3 of the ship will have duty on any given day, but if it's not your duty day, well, you're essentially a tourist. You can't leave our host nation. But, you can explore inside of that nation pretty well as much as you want, as long as you're back on the ship on time. We had some really good ports with the McFaul. We did a lot of ports up and down the East Coast as we were doing training operations, throughout the time there. We went Rotterdam, Netherlands. We pulled into. It's about a 45-minute train ride from Amsterdam. So, of course, we had to go to Amsterdam. And Amsterdam's really a beautiful city. Like the architecture is kind of unlike anywhere I've ever seen. As young sailors, there was only one thing we were looking for in Amsterdam, and that was the red light district, right? It's really one street that's like 2 blocks long.
Yeah.
It's not what everybody makes it out to be. There's so much more to Amsterdam outside of that. And let's see. I mean, we went to Lisbon, Portugal. I felt like I was walking uphill everywhere I went in Lisbon. I was not a fan. We found this little hole-in-the-wall bar as we're walking up this hill. Like, it's almost literally a hole in the wall to walk in this bar. And so we walk in, we're hot, we're walking uphill, and there's a huge language barrier. There's this old man and woman that are running this bar. They don't speak English, right? We don't speak Portuguese.
Yeah.
And I'm like, beer? In motion with my hand, right? And oh yeah. So they pour this beer from the tap, and they give us each one, and it's maybe like a half pint glass. And I look at it, and it's an unfiltered beer, like there's pulp floating in it. I'm like, what is this?
Did you clean the glass?
Right, exactly. And I take a sip, and it's like skunky beer, and I'm, oh God. And we're all just kind of trying to choke this beer down and be polite, and the old man walks in the back with his wife for a minute, and I take the opportunity to reach over the bar and pour the beer down the bar rail, and I almost get caught as he walks back in, and we're all just laughing, and he looks at my glass, he goes, oh, and he grabs it and fills it back up. I'm like, no.
Oh, man.
Please don't. Yeah, we went to Augusta Bay, Sicily, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, both Jebel Ali and Dubai. I was in Dubai in 2006, and I'm sure it's night and day different going back there today. This was before the Palm Islands. The Burj Al Arab was the big fancy hotel there then that changed shapes, but there was a billboard there that showed side-by-side pictures, 1996 and 2006. 1996 was a picture of sand dunes. And then 2006, it was like they had to have been building 20 skyscrapers at a time. There were cranes everywhere. And that was one of the coolest places I think I've ever been, was Dubai. I mean, I've been to 17 countries on 4 continents, and that's one of those that I'd like to go back to.
So these port calls, just so everybody understand, so that I understand, one primary purpose is resupply, right?
Sure.
What other purposes besides being able to just get off the ship for a bit?
Part of it is just being out there showing the flag.
Gotcha. A show of force, almost?
Yeah. At the time, 2006 was kind of a show of unity with all of the coalition forces against, fighting the global war on terror. But yeah, it can be a show of force. It can be a show of solidarity.
Mm-hmm.
Anywhere you go in the world, the stars and stripes mean something.
Mm-hmm.
So that's largely it. Far less of it is really resupply. We'd always resupply something when we pull in, but most of the time when the Navy has to resupply a ship, we do it at sea. Because if we get used to resupplying in port, and then something happens and we're actually in a naval battle state, we're not going to be able to pull into port. Ports are going to be closed.
Yeah.
We're not going to be able to get in. So a large oil tanker ship will pull up next to us, and they shoot we would used to use an M14 and shoot a line over to the supply ship. They'd hook it up to the fuel hoses. We have to then pull those hoses back over to the ship. I just saw a video of this explaining an underway replenishment that I had to send to my kids, but then I had to add, now imagine doing it in high seas at night. The North Atlantic can get ridiculous. There's my kids are always sending me videos on TikTok of these clips from the North Sea.
Yeah.
And the North Atlantic's not quite the North Sea, but I've literally walked on walls as the ship rocks through the North Atlantic.
I think we've heard that before too.
Yeah, we have. Yeah. It's incredible.
I mean, you're walking down the P-way and the ship tilts, 40 degrees, and let me step over here on the wall, and then back on the floor, and then we go back the other way onto the left side of the left bulkhead, and it's intense, especially those small ships. They can really get tossed around. We had one time in the North Atlantic where I was on the forward fueling station as a phone talker, so I communicated with the bridge and the aft fueling station, and I remember talking to the person in the pilot house where they control the ship and saying, this is really rough. Like, are they going to call this off? Because generally at a certain sea state, they call the unrep off. We'll do it in the morning when the seas are smoother. And they said, I don't think they're going to call it off. And we got to a point where the bow of the ship would dip down into a wave, and we would have blue water come up over the forecastle. And there were, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 of us that were up on that forward fueling station. And I remember just grabbing onto the people on either side of you and just pulling in, because then we'd get slammed up against that forward bulkhead, just trying to make sure nobody gets washed off the side. It's probably one of the most dangerous evolutions that takes place in the Navy is an underway replenishment.
Sounds like it.
And it was cold, it was wet, the sea state was horrible. I'm still pretty shocked to this day that we didn't lose anybody on that one, because it was...
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, it was intense.
So this is interesting. You go from living a life like that on the sea to recruiting back here in St. Louis. Something you said that I found really interesting, or at least I wanted to double back on. At some point, you ran your own recruiting station.
Yeah.
What goes into that?
Having more accountability and answering to everybody on a higher level for production. Everybody in Navy recruiting has somebody that is on their back all the time about just numbers. Like you can be a successful recruiter, at least at the time. A successful recruiter could average one person per month that they put in the Navy.
That would be deemed a success.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, things happen where if, say I get somebody to sign a contract in, April, and they're not leaving until next January. Well, and then at Christmas they say, I don't want to leave my family. I can't do this. Well, they're not legally really bound to that contract until they swear in and leave for boot camp.
So you could have a pipeline.
Right. Well, if it was an in-month no ship, right, or attrition, then that went against you for 2.
Ooh.
So if you don't have anybody in this month and somebody was supposed to ship this month just said, I'm not going, well, now you're -2. So it was, I thought I was going to a cake shore duty. Recruiting is a very arduous duty. I worked, largely 6 days a week, up to 12 hours a day or more in some cases, especially towards the end of the month, and you're just trying to make that goal. I might have my individual goal. My individual goal is typically 2. That's just kind of how our office ran, but then the office has to make their goal, the district has to make their goal, the nation has to make their goal. So everybody on that mission day, that last day of the month, is trying to get anything they can get in to stick. Well, this guy was denied at the beginning of the month for whatever. Well, let's see if we can get him a waiver today, right? I think largely, though, it's about there's this pressure to just kind of hit a number, and the number's important, but it's also about getting the right people. Yeah. I always looked at it as, do I want to go back to a ship one day and have to work with this person every day? And there were a couple that got through that, the answer honestly is probably no. But and I kept waiting for somebody at Great Lakes to call and, cuss me out putting this person in. But they were qualified, right? The Navy has standards, and as long as you meet those standards, they can't really say no.
If they don't make it through the boot camp, does that negatively affect a recruiter? Like if they get recycled a couple of times and they don't make it, is that you're past what you were responsible for?
Generally speaking, once they ship, they're out of your hair. If there's a pattern that shows up at boot camp that people are standing up and saying, "Oh, my recruiter told me not to talk about my asthma or ADHD or whatever," or if they keep a file of who put this person in. Oh, now there's another one that says this recruiter said, "Shut up! Don't tell them about your ADHD." That can come back to get you.
Gotcha.
But generally, as long as they ship, they go to boot camp, that's our job. We've done our role. We got them, to that physical fitness standard of being able to meet the basic physical fitness requirements when they get to boot camp. So then they're set up for success the rest of the way there.
I have 2 more questions about your recruiting stage, and I want to get to the rest of your time in service. What was your pitch as a recruiter?
We actually went through a professional sales course in Pensacola to be qualified for recruiting duty, and it was called the Need Satisfaction Selling Process. And basically, to sum it up without an hour sit down of questions, it comes down to, what are your goals? And now I'm going to talk to you about the features and benefits of the Navy that are going to help you achieve your goals. And I always told people, I have no incentive really to lie to get you to join the Navy, right? I can tell you all these great things about how the Navy's going to help you achieve your goals, and you go to boot camp, you get out to the fleet, and then you realize, that Chuck Robinson's a liar. And what are you going to do? You're going to call back to St. Louis. You're going to tell everybody that Chuck Robinson at the Navy office is a liar. Don't listen to that guy. And then I'm not going to be successful. I'm not going to be able to put anybody else in. But if I show you how the Navy can truly help you achieve your goals, and you get out there and you start achieving those goals, instead you're going to call back and tell everybody, Chuck really helped me out.
Yeah, go see him.
He got me out here. Yeah. I'm really doing great things. I'm achieving my goals. You need to go talk to him.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question, Ethan?
Of course.
I didn't interrupt you, but it just struck me. You mentioned, and it seemed like a lot to me within the St. Louis, I call it market, right? You had several offices.
Yeah.
Were you limited to who you could recruit for, or could you essentially, if I was at a restaurant and I saw your uniform and I said, "Hey, Chuck, what do you do?" And you said, "Hey, are you interested in going to the Navy?" Or do you have to kind of stay within your purview?
The only time the boundaries are really set is when it comes to high school students. So those juniors and seniors in high school, that high school is assigned to a particular recruiter. You don't touch anybody in that high school if it's not your assigned school.
Gotcha.
Once they're out of high school, it's fair game. So anybody that you talk to, meet with, whatever. I was always working. You know, if I were out to dinner, I was talking to people. I'd leave my business card in the middle of the sugar thing with all the sugar packets. I'd tuck it in there, so eventually somebody would get to it. And that's a sign. I should call this guy. I don't think anybody ever actually called me off of that, but you know, we'd leave the little we called RADs, recruiter assistant devices, a little, you know, take a penny, leave a penny kind of thing.
Sure.
I actually found one of those with my name on it. It would have been like 2018, I think. It was like the year after I got out of the Navy, and that was a 10-year-old sign there, 10-year-old business card, CTR2, Chuck Robinson, and that was just neat.
That was actually a great segue, Jason, so I appreciate that question. The other question I had about recruiting is, how did you find recruiting to be in the St. Louis area?
Well, we're not a Navy town, right?
That's kind of my guess. Yeah.
I think most people in our area are more driven to join the Army,
Sure.
or the Marine Corps, or the Air Force. We've got Scott Air Force Base, you know, right across the river. But the Navy is different because probably most of the people that grow up here don't see the ocean until they're an adult, right? And the idea of going out on that ocean on a relatively small ship is kind of terrifying, right? On the other hand, you've got people who, you know, we were at war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and there were people who wanted to serve but didn't want to be boots on the ground. Mm-hmm. So they would turn to the Navy. Now, I always explain to people that we do have boots on the ground, and it's not just the special warfare guys you think of.
Yeah.
People in my own community have fought and died in the sand. We've had several people in the CT community who have gone into those operations, either just attached to a normal Army unit, or sometimes it's attached to a special warfare unit. So I never liked people to have the impression that, oh, well, if I join the Navy, I'm not going to the desert. Yeah. You might. And I heard another service recruiter in the next room telling an applicant one time, oh, you don't want to join the Navy. Those guys eat off styrofoam plates and plastic forks all the time. And, you know, here we don't ever go to the desert. And it was kind of like an after hours thing. And I walked out in the hall. I grabbed the little service magazine out of his stand there and flipped it to the article about people from that service in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I said, when you're done listening to this guy's lies, I'm next door. I'd be happy to talk to you and shoot you straight. You know, I just don't think that I don't think that there's really doing anyone a service to lie to people to get them to serve their country.
At the end of the day, no one is really safe if you're in the military.
And you think with like social media and just the internet itself, that people do a lot more research now on their own, or no?
Definitely. Yeah, I'd say people definitely do a lot more research on their own, but a lot of people still fall for games, I guess. But no, I'm a firm believer. I completely agree that every single person that signs on that line should be prepared to go into combat in service of their country.
Yep. Exactly.
It doesn't matter if you're a cook or if you're in admin, or, you know, it doesn't matter what your job is. The Marines really have that one right. Everybody's a rifleman first.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in Pearl Harbor, those cooks had to fight.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, that was the heat of the battle right there.
And at the end of the day, as a fellow veteran, I don't want someone in my ranks who is hoping that they don't have to see combat.
Exactly.
I want someone who, I'm not going to say someone who, you know, desires it or is longing for it, but someone that at least understands the potential consequences.
Right. And, you know, I've run into the deployment dodgers, and or early on it was, and really even before, between 9/11 and my time joining, there were a lot of, well, I just joined for college. I didn't join to go to war, right? And it's like, are you crazy? Like, okay, yeah, we were at peace for a while, but let's be honest. Have we ever had long-standing peace in the 250 years that our military's been around?
A few years here and there.
Right. And if you sign on that line, you have to be ready to make that commitment to do whatever's required of you.
Exactly.
It's not a normal 9-to-5 job. It's a special calling of service, and that's what people need to look at it as.
So let's move past your recruiting stage. That was 4 years worth, is that right?
A little over 3 years, yeah.
Okay. What was next?
Next, I went to Goodfellow Air Force Base in Texas for analysis and reporting school, so a C school. And I was there so that was, I would have left for there around February, I want to say, of 2011. My daughter was born in June of 2010, so she was very young. My son then was about 6, and I went to Texas for school. My wife stayed home with the kids. So about 4 months of that. But in the meantime, in those 4 months, we're very excited because we've got orders of our dreams to Hawaii, right? So I get out of C school at Goodfellow. We move to Hawaii, and June 10th of 2011, it's Kamehameha Day. There's parades in the street. King Kamehameha is the king that unified the Hawaiian Islands, and so it was a really cool welcome to Hawaii, the Komo Mai. And from the minute, well, I guess not the minute we got there late at night, can't see a whole lot. When we woke up the next morning, it's like we're living in a painting.
Yeah.
Hawaii very quickly became my second home. I absolutely love Hawaii, the climate, the environment, the culture, the food. Recently discovered a local Hawaiian food truck that is every bit as good as what you got on the island. I'll give you all the information. It's one, I think everybody needs to try it. And my first tour, so I did back-to-back tours in Hawaii. The first tour, I was in a cryptologic direct support unit. So we sent teams out to ships as necessary to conduct missions and then come home. Sometimes that mission was a whole deployment. Sometimes it was, something a little more brief. And not long after I was there, we kind of had a rotation. So I was a first-class petty officer at the time in E6, and we had a kind of a rotation based on who was home and who was deployed, really, of who was running the shop back home. And so I was one of those people that was running that shop fairly regularly. And so all of the cryptologic technician collection guys, both surface and subsurface, all worked in my shop and deployed all over the PACOM area of responsibility. And that covers 52% of the globe. Wow. So at any given time, I had sailors that I was responsible for that were deployed literally over half the earth. Yeah. And there was a lot of, go out for 3 or 4 months, come home for a month, go back out, a lot of short notice deployments. And that was definitely an arduous duty too. It's a lot of being direct support or probably away from home more than PCS afloat guys, the permanent ships company.
Was that a duty that, to me, from you describing it, it almost sounds like that was probably as close as you got to that SWIX kind of lifestyle in your career? Or not so much?
I'd say not so much. It's really not a special warfare thing. I mean, we did a lot of cool and interesting intelligence gathering, I guess, would be the safe thing to say. We worked a lot with the FDNF, the Forward Deployed Naval Forces in Japan. I did, I think, 3 trips. I think the first one was on the USS Essex out of Japan and Sasebo. That was for them to transfer all those operations over to the USS Bonhomme Richard. And I went back and did 2 or 3 deployments with the Bonhomme Richard as well, which is a cool piece of history kind of, too, just because that ship's not around anymore. That's the one that had a really big fire in San Diego a few years ago. I think it was in 2020. Somebody, I believe, had set fire in a hazmat locker and completely destroyed the ship. Wow. So, yeah, that ship
totally
is no
unusable
longer
after that.
Right.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Hawaii is, I'm always curious to ask veterans about their tours in Hawaii, because you hear those stories of Native Hawaiians hate tourists. Tell us your perspective on Hawaii.
I'll tell you the same thing I told sailors that were newly checking into the command, that there's kind of two ways to go about your time in Hawaii. If you come to Hawaii and you try to make it St. Louis or Dallas or Chicago or wherever you came from, it's not going to work, right? Hawaii has a very strong culture. And if you try to be that person to say, I know I'm in your home, but I don't care about your culture, I'm bringing my culture here, right? Just like any culture going anywhere, that just doesn't work. The other way to go about it is to really love the land, the environment, the culture. And I had a lot of friends who were, local Hawaiian, Native Hawaiians, a lot of people, just white people that have always lived in Hawaii, right? I lived on a part of the island that was very largely white people that had been in Hawaii for a very long time. I have a good friend who works for the Hawaiian government doing events and stuff, and it always comes down to just having respect for the culture. A lot of people have a big misconception about the word aloha. Oh, it means hello, goodbye, and I love you, right? It literally means the breath of life. And it's that spirit of aloha that really defines Hawaii. And if you embrace that spirit, then you're going to be welcomed in Hawaii, no matter who you are. But if you go and try to bring this malice and hate and discontent that you brought from the mainland, that's when it's go home, Howley. Yeah, it just comes down to blending into your environment and embracing your environment rather than coming in harshly and trying to change it.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Okay, I'm guessing you had to have visited Pearl Harbor.
Oh, yeah,
So
many times.
Tell us about that.
I love going to Pearl Harbor. Just being there with that history. Anytime I got a chance to just have some free time, I'd often just go to Pearl Harbor. Ford Island is kind of in the middle of Pearl Harbor. And especially on a quiet day, like a Sunday morning, like December 7th, 1941, it's like you can just feel that energy there, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. You know, the USS Missouri is moored right next to the Arizona Memorial. They say as a reminder not to wake a sleeping giant. To this day, oil still leaks that you can see if you're standing on the pier at the Missouri. I actually got my Chiefs anchors pinned on September 13th, 2013. It's my 30th birthday on the deck of the Missouri.
How cool.
So, yeah.
Oh, very nice.
Is the feeling, well, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. What is that feeling?
Solemn. It's very solemn. You never forget about all the lives that were lost there that day, and the people who otherwise didn't think they would ever be in a combat role jumped right into one. There are stories for days about these individuals who jumped to action when the attack started. And one small detail of that attack probably would have changed the entire course of the war. The Japanese were supposed to attack the oil reserves on Oahu, northwest of Pearl Harbor, and for whatever reason, I'm sure I've read or heard at some point why they didn't, but that would have crippled us. We would have had to go back to San Diego to refuel, but instead we were able to rebuild the fleet and stay out of Pearl Harbor and continue to,
push westward,
fight against the advance of Japan coming across the Pacific.
Yeah. I've never gotten to visit. I've never been to Hawaii. That's a place that I desperately want to visit at some point. And I'd love to see Pearl Harbor. So thanks for sharing your perspective.
Absolutely. I think everybody should go.
I agree.
It's one of the most incredible pieces of history I've ever, been there and seen it. It's like if you've ever been to Gettysburg. It's very similar. Just that feeling.
And you can almost feel what happened there.
Yes.
Yeah. That
on the opposite side of Ford Island from the Missouri and the Arizona, there was the USS Utah. And I believe the Utah was a training ship at the time. But one of the chiefs on board the Utah went to work that day with an urn that had his infant child's remains inside. And that urn is still entombed inside the USS Utah today. But if you went out there early on a Sunday morning, watching the sunrise, I'm sure it's really just cars driving on the highway across the harbor, but it's almost like you can hear planes flying. Just sitting there on that pier.
What a strange sensation.
It's very surreal.
That's one of those monuments. It's essentially a living monument. I think it's incredibly important for all Americans to see and have that gravity of what happened here and the lives that were lost there and all the sacrifices that were made. Anyway, I'm a huge proponent of understanding our history, especially military history.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2 tours in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. What came after that?
So that was the end of my
Gotcha.
naval career.
That goes
so my
up to 2017.
Yeah, my second tour in Hawaii was shore duty, which was great. I actually took any orders I could to stay in Hawaii at the time. My wife at the time was she's a singer. She's a phenomenal singer. She was opening for every country headliner that came to Hawaii.
That's cool.
She opened for Miranda Lambert, Florida Georgia Line, a bunch of others.
That's awesome.
So I didn't want to PCS somewhere else again and have her start all over again, right? So I was like, this job that I took was the Cyber Combat Mission Team 502. They were just standing these teams up. I'm not a cyber guy. That's never been my realm of that world. But, I was going to do anything to stay in Hawaii at that point. I went to another sea school back in Pensacola. That's kind of when going back, right, after my dad died, I was in a really dark place, So that was February 2013, my dad died. September of 2013, I made chief. My dad was always supposed to pin my anchors on. Yeah. It was a really difficult time. My grandpa came out and pinned my anchors on, and that was awesome. I wasn't getting any kind of help with my grief. I did go one time begrudgingly to this therapist, and she was a retired Army nurse. She's like, "Oh, what branch are you in?" I'm like, "The Navy." "Oh, okay, so you don't deploy or anything." I'm like, gosh. What? Yeah, I've got 5 sea service deployment ribbons. Yeah, I deploy. Well, not like real deployments.
Wow.
What makes my deployments or my friend's sacrifice any less than any other deployment? Deployments are different, but none are any less than another, right? We're all leaving our families and sacrificing in defense of our nation. And I was...
So report out the window immediately.
Right. Again, so the Navy never deploys. Oh, my dad, who killed himself, he was deployed to Vietnam. My buddy Sully just died the year before, too, right, on a deployment. It really turned me off to therapy that I didn't want to get in the first place, right? I was trying to be the tough guy. I don't need therapy. That's a bunch of nonsense. And
then you give it a try, and it sucks.
Yeah, and around the same time, come to find out later, I was really getting sick. I had no energy at all. I was losing weight. No matter what I did, I couldn't stop losing weight. I eventually got down to about 145 pounds.
Wow.
And I kept going to my primary care doctor at the time. You know, anytime I was there for something else, it was, hey, doc, while I'm here, you know all that stuff they talk about on the radio about low testosterone? I've got all of that. And he said, oh, you're too young. You don't have low testosterone. The same doctor told me I didn't need a sleep study because I'm not fat enough for sleep apnea. By the way, I have moderate severe sleep apnea. And every time I went back to medical for something, I always asked the doc, you know, can we just do a testosterone test, please? Like, I really feel like something's not right. You're too young for that. You're fine. Get back to work. The same doctor used to walk around Makalapa Health Clinic in Hawaii at Pearl Harbor and brag about how much money he saved the Navy by not sending people for tests. Fast forward 4 years of this. So now, this was 2016. I was divorced in 2015 between the stuff with my dad and then this stuff building up. I go to the emergency room. I've got a kidney stone. And they come in after doing some blood work and they said, Chief, anybody ever tell you you're anemic? Yeah, every time you guys draw my blood, but nobody ever tells me what it really means for me or how to fix it, right? It's just a note on there somewhere. They said, well, it can be pretty serious and you should talk to your doctor about getting screened for bloodborne cancer. And yeah, about that face, my jaw dropped and I freaking out. And I had just gotten a new primary care doctor. I don't think I had been to see him at all yet. Went to see him and I said, Doc, they said, you know, I might have bloodborne cancer. He said, yeah, maybe. But there's a lot of other stuff that it could be that's way more simple. You might just need to take an iron vitamin. So he's like, I'm going to send you for some lab work. I said, can we look at the cancer thing first? Because that's what I'm more worried about.
Kind of a big deal.
He said, well, just bear with me. Let's do some labs, and then we'll look at where we need to go from there. So he sends me out for some labs. I come back to get the results. He's like, well, everything's good. I'm going to send you for some other labs, though. All right. I go back. Oh, those are all good, too. I'm going to try one more set of labs. I go out for labs, come back a few days later. The doc comes in with tears in his eyes, and he said, Chief, I don't know what else to do, and I'm afraid at this point the most likely case scenario might be the worst case, and I think at this point I need to just refer you out to oncology. And I remember going out to the parking lot and just sitting on the curb outside my truck, and I called then my ex-wife, still knows me better than anybody, right? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I go to this oncology appointment, and I check in, and I'm looking around, and everybody's there for their chemo and radiation appointments, and I'm, thinking this is my life now. This is where I'm going. The doctor comes back, calls my name. I go walking through the door into the hall with her, and she's like, so how are you today? I'm like, honestly, ma'am,
Don't be so chipper, lady.
Right. I said, honestly, ma'am, I'm really nervous to be here. She said, oh, don't be. You don't have cancer. And I about just dropped to my knees in that hallway. And she said, come on back to my office. We'll talk about it. She said, yeah, you're anemic. I went back and looked at your blood work for a long time, and you've been anemic for a long time, like 5-6 years at least. But you're not cancer anemic. If you were anemic due to cancer for this long, you would be in really bad shape. So let's talk about it and figure out what's really causing this. And she asked me a bunch of questions, and she says, honestly, Chief, I think you might just have low testosterone. I said, ma'am, I've been trying to get a testosterone test for 4 years. She said, well, you're getting one today.
There we go.
So she sends me for a test, finally. And I go back to get the results. So normal, quote-unquote, normal range of testosterone is like 350 to 1,200, whatever units they measure it in, right? I go in to get my results. I'm at 26.
Wow.
The oncologist said, I'm really worried about you. I said, well, I get it. Give me a shot in the butt and send me on my way, right? She said, no, it's really a lot more serious than that, and I'm going to have to refer you out to an endocrinologist who specializes in hormones. And I go see the endocrinologist, and First thing she says, I'm really worried about you. I said, I get it. Give me a shot in the butt, send me on my way. It's a lot worse than that, and the testosterone is really the least of your worries. You also have virtually no thyroid or cortisol hormones. Wow. And I said, well, I know thyroid does. I don't know really what cortisol does other than it makes you fat, right? She said, well, that's your stress and trauma response hormone. She said, basically, if you and I both left here today and we each got in a car accident, she said, my body would start producing cortisol to help deal with that trauma until I got help, right? Yours will not. So instead, you'll quickly go into shock, coma, death. It's called type 2 adrenal insufficiency. And she said, one of two things could have caused this. Either you had a head injury that damaged your pituitary gland, or it's a tumor. I'm like, it's definitely a head injury. Like, I've wrecked motorcycles without helmets. I've, banged my head on all kinds of stuff. That's got to be a head injury. And she said, well, as confident as you are, we're still going to send you for an MRI to be sure. And I come back for the results of the MRI. There's a lot of drama at my command surrounding. People don't believe that I'm spending this much time at medical.
I was about to say, yeah.
They actually tried to send me to an Article 15 over it. Oh my God. Until I left my executive officer's inquiry, went back for my MRI results, and she said, as I'm pulling up Arnold Schwarzenegger memes on my phone, it's not a tumor. She comes in and she says, bad news, Chief. I'm like, put my phone back in my pocket. She's like, it's a tumor. And she said, it's not cancerous, I don't think. But as these things go, it's a pretty big one. Typically, these pituitary tumors are like 5 to 7 millimeters, like the tip of a ballpoint pen. Yours is 2.6 centimeters, so like a grape.
Wow.
And it seems to have completely crushed your pituitary gland, and I don't know that you'll ever get pituitary function back. We need to get that out before it causes more damage and potentially kills you. I said, all right, great. What civilian hospital am I going to have brain surgery?
Yeah.
And she says, well, there's a doctor who is visiting from Texas who specializes in this particular kind of surgery, and I would trust him to do it on my kids. I'm like, why did you have to bring kids into it? All right, fine. But before anybody goes fiddling around in my brain and I risk losing any kind of mental or motor function, I need to be able to go back home and spend time with my kids like I am right now.
Sure.
So this was November 2016. I came home for Thanksgiving, spent time with my kids, went back, and in December, they went through my right nostril. And kind of like the best way I can describe it is, you remember Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Sure, yeah.
When he puts that thing up his nose and pulls out the big red orb that they're tracking him with, that's basically how they did the surgery to remove this tumor. And then they took a piece of my septum and patched the hole and put me on, hormone replacements, and that made me non-deployable. And every doctor I had said, Chief, you got to be medically retired and 100% disabled. And we need to get your med board going quick because it's stressful just being in the military.
Exactly.
It's exponentially more stressful being in a position of leadership, and we got to get you out of here. So they sent me for a med board. So when you go for a med board, they send your package to a board in D.C. that is made up of 3 officers, 06 or above. I think it's 2 medical officers and then 1 line officer. And they assign you an attorney to represent you. And what I got from my attorney when it was all over was, well, one of them looked and saw that your EAOS is in 3 months. So they said, well, we don't have to pay him if we just let him out. So rather than giving me medical retirement, or even if they had found that I wasn't deserving of medical retirement and just medical separation, as a chief with over 13 years of service, was like $114,000 severance that they would have owed me. But because I was so close to the end of my current contract, despite 13 and a half years of service, they said, just let him get out. So under the advice of my physicians, they said I could stay in, re-enlist, and then in 6 months go to another med board.
Sure.
Where I continue going down this, very risky medical path
Yeah.
of staying in. And if in 6 months they say I'm still fit to continue service, I'm stuck for another 4 years,
Exactly.
continuing to have
Huge
that risk. And so, I took their advice. I just separated at my AOS at 13 years, 6 months, and 27 days, and came back home to be with my kids. Yeah, that's pretty much where my Navy story wrapped up there.
Usually I will ask, tell us why you decided to separate. I don't have to this time with
Right.
you, Chuck.
That's an incredible audacity of those guys to even think that way.
I was going to ask, did you feel supported by your leadership?
No, not at all. So, well, specific people that more peers, I would say yes. There's one senior chief who's now a master chief who was very supportive, but by and large, no. My department chief one day says, "We don't believe you're spending this much time in medical." I said, "Great, call medical. They can't tell you why I was there, but they
Sure.
can tell you every appointment I have.
Yeah.
Call them." Well, we're not going to do that, but we are going to send you to a disciplinary review board. Now, typically, a disciplinary review board is the first step in an Article 15 or a non-judicial punishment, captain's mess in the Navy. And it's a fact-finding mission. So the accused comes before the chief's mess. We interview them to find out what really happened, right? Get past the smoke screens and all that stuff and find out what the true facts are to figure out if it's something that can be handled at our level or if it needs to be forwarded up the chain of command. Well, when a chief goes to DRB, it's usually master chiefs only. It's not your peers, right? I actually had that experience right after I made chief. I got caught riding a motorcycle in short sleeves, and they really threw a fit over that one too. But it was just master chiefs. My command master chief rode motorcycles too. He's like, "Listen, we got to go through the steps here."
Sure,
right?
sure, for show.
Right. Just hold everybody to the same standard, right?
Yeah.
Which fully support. So fast forward, I go to this DRB and I walk in, and pretty much all of my peers are in this room. And I got a letter from the endocrinologist who, basically gave me a letter that explains everything that's going on, minus the actual tumor. They hadn't found that part yet. And that on top of that, this entire ridiculous process that they were putting me through was more detrimental to my health with the added stress. My command master chief starts the DRB by saying, "I read your letter. I'll even go so far as to say I believe it came from a doctor. But I don't give a fuck." I said, "Roger that, Master Chief." And I sat there and I took the berating, and somebody from the back of the room yells, "You don't even want to be here, do you?" In this room? No, absolutely not. Really still in the Navy at this point. I was struggling with it because my kids were back here in St. Louis, right? Mm-hmm. No, I wasn't happy in the Navy at that point, but I still continued to do the mission and take care of my sailors, right? And I just got torn. Part of the problem was everybody in the chief's mess that supported me at the time, who knew better, were like, in protest, "I'm not going to that." No, please go to it and speak up on my behalf, right? Yeah. But no, and it was, "We're sending you to XOI, Executive Officer's Inquiry." All right, got it, cool. Our XO was a prior chief too, so pretty much anything the chief's mess sent up to him, he was going to send to the captain. I went to the XOI and tried to explain to the XO the same thing. "Feel free, call medical. Here's the letter that Command Master Chief doesn't care about, but it explains the whole thing." He says, "Well, I'm going to back the chief's mess up, and I'm going to recommend you for captain's mast." And I went straight from that to the appointment with the endocrinologist to find that I had the tumor. I left that appointment, called my department chief, and said, "Hey, I know you don't care, but here's finally the answer of what's going on. I've got a brain tumor." He's like, "Oh, Chuck, I'm so sorry, brother. Let me call the CMC and the XO, and we'll see if we can just get this whole thing dropped." I said, "Don't do me any favors." At this point, I'd be happy to go in front of the captain and tell him the whole story.
Yep.
They wound up dropping it, and I told them at that point that I wasn't there for the extra. extra Chiefs Mess stuff, the fundraisers and the social events and all that anymore, because I'm not trying to go socialize with the people that were in that room trying to railroad me.
Yeah.
I said, I'll be here for my sailors, and that's it. Don't expect anything else out of me. And then I finished out the last few months of my contract there, and then left with not much more than just a see ya.
No ceremony or anything like that.
No.
Wow.
No end of tour write-ups or gifts or awards or anything like that. And I was, not too upset about that part. I was ready to be out of that situation. The vast majority of the chiefs that I served with in Hawaii are fantastic people. They're mostly people that I still consider very close today. I've got one of my best friends in the world. He was my first mentor on the McFaul. We served together in my last tour in Hawaii. He kind of bookended my career, and we still talk nearly every day. And I had to work for a while kind of internally to remember the great things that the Chiefs Mess represents, and that those few people don't represent the whole. And it took me a while of thinking about all of the good things that the Chiefs Mess does globally to get over the offense I had
to reckon
with
it.
a few people that decided to make me look, like a shitbag.
Yeah. This is one of those tough parts of the military. I've seen it myself, and I'm sorry to hear about that experience, Chuck, especially when it comes to someone who, based off the story you've shared with us and based off my interaction with you, someone who cared so deeply about his service, to be treated in such an abysmal way towards the end of your service. I'm devastated to hear that happened. But this is an aspect of the military I think is sad, quite frankly. There's an aspect of being a service member that involves stripping your individuality and stripping who you were before you joined. But at the end of the day, we're still human beings, and stress still has an effect on our minds and our bodies. Loss and grief still has an effect on us. And some people are able to deal with it in certain ways, and others are not. But this is a situation where it's like they completely forgot about Chuck Robinson, the human, and all they cared about was, well, here's a Navy service member that doesn't want to be here. I think it's disgusting when leaders take that kind of attitude and they forget what is supposed to be one of their main priorities, which is to take care of their people. Right. So I'm sorry to hear that happened to you, Chuck. I'm really devastated. That was the end of your service.
It's okay. I've come to terms with it. At the end of the day, I was happy to come back home to the St. Louis area and be with my kids all the time again. Seeing my kids once or twice a year was not cutting it. So at the end of the day, October 31st of 2017, my last day in the Navy was a happy day for me. There are still people that I talk to in the Navy all the time, whether it's, brothers and sisters in the Chiefs Mess that we continue to support each other today, or it's my former junior sailors who are now having great careers of their own. I'm waiting on a couple people to make chief themselves that I promised I will be there the day they get cool. Anchors pinned on their collar.
You've served as that mentor role for those people. The last thing I want to say, it shows an incredible amount of resilience that you were able to reckon with what had happened and kind of work through things on your own to find the positives from your naval career. So I really applaud you for being able to do that and step out of that horrendous experience with a positive outlook. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us, Chuck.
Absolutely. I'm interested to find out what you're doing now post-military service and Navy career.
Sure. So full-time, I'm an agent with Farmers Insurance in Cottleville, And that's how I met Nina, through the Chamber of Commerce in Cottleville and Weldon Spring. And I've started working on a venture. So a lot of what I did, the kind of stuff we didn't talk about, was from a very early time in my career. When I first got to McFaul, I was always involved in anti-terrorism force protection training team, and the visit board search seizure training team, and the physical security element, and physical security on a skiff and all that stuff. And a few years ago, actually, it was right after the Uvalde school shooting, I was having conversations with people about the continuing tragedy of school shootings and how we can prevent them. I'd have these conversations. I'm like, it's kind of basic stuff. We do X, Y, and Z, and I'd get blank stares from people. And they're like, Chuck, that's not common sense. And I came to the realization that it's just kind of ingrained knowledge from my own personal experience. And I've been kind of working towards, I've really kind of put my foot on the gas on it very recently. But I'm starting a company to provide security assessments and consultations for schools, places of worship, small businesses, and even like executive residents, but primarily focused on schools, right? If I can do something to help a school prevent one school shooter, I'll be more than satisfied, right? So yeah, that's kind of my side and coming towards the forefront project right now, is to start working with some of the school districts in the area. And I'm also finishing a certification it's not just my experience in the Navy, right? What does the Navy know about protecting a school? I'm finishing a certification specifically for security assessments of schools to bring that, knowledge and experience directly into that school atmosphere, and just make sure that schools are doing the right thing, have the right security practices, have the right, window glazing and locks, to make sure that the school's properly protected to best avoid these types of travesties from happening to begin with. Too often we have a reactive response to things, where I'm trying to make this a proactive initiative to make sure it doesn't happen to begin with. So
Excellent.
It's been a real honor to meet you and speak with you. You have an incredible story of service. I kind of want to go back to your dad, if you don't mind, a
Sure.
little bit. Jason here is a Gold Star son, lost his father at a young age, 11 years old. Your father was actually born in the same year as my father, so I feel kind of this connection with you. What memories do you keep with you about your dad?
Oh, man. I would say so many. My dad was known for telling stories, and sometimes he'd tell you the same story over and over and over again, but you would hang on to every detail in the stories he would tell. And I would say it's a combination of thinking back to those stories, thinking back to my dad's patriotism, and the principles that he really instilled in me of a hard work ethic, patriotism, honesty. Kind of goes back to our core values in the Navy, that honor, courage, and commitment. Those are the things that my dad instilled in me from a very young age, and those are the things that I hold on to today.
Thanks for sharing that, Chuck.
And we're so glad to have you in our show today, and really just to save these stories. I always tell people we can't ever get these stories back when people are gone, so we got to get them now and save them forever. Not just getting your story, but also getting to hear about your dad. Now your dad's out there forever, so I love doing that. That's one reason why I do this podcast. At any rate, man, it's been a pleasure. I learned so much today that I didn't even know. I appreciate you sharing with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been great, guys.
We're going to go ahead and sign off of the Operation Insight podcast from the Mid-America Veterans Museum. Operation Insight is brought to you by the Mid-America Veterans Museum. The museum is a 501c3 nonprofit business. Do you like our podcast? With your support, we'll continue to bring you great programming. If you'd like to donate, go to mavm.org and click on Donate.